Flow with the show. Hey, welcome to Flow with the show. Hey, hope you're doing okay. I'm Toronto electronic music vocalist, Flo Anastasia, and this is episode number 10. Holy moly, we made it. And as a special location celebration, we've got a special location again today. If you guys are watching the video, you'll notice we are in the most beautiful podcast studio space. Thank you to our guest, who is none other than Marco Furgiuele, a human being of many talents. I'll try to list a few, but how can words encompass such a special consciousness here? Marco is a freelance sound recordist who's done all types of media productions, from working on the sets of movies, shows, commercials, tons more. He does sound recording, editing, mixing, and I think while we've only met once before, Marco, I was extra drawn to you just by your positive energy and thoughtfulness and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for having us here, for being on the show.
Thank you guys for coming. This is so exciting.
It is very exciting.
This is very exciting. And to help out today as well, I've got my podcast partner, Tyr Kohout, Toronto music producer, vocal engineer on all my songs, tech supervisor on this podcast. He's the one usually behind the scenes processing all the audio, correcting all the colors, and had to get him in front of the scenes. Is that how you say behind the scenes? On front of the
scenes? Who knows?
On the show today, because I actually know Marco through Tyr. Tyr, you've done some work with Marco in the past on set, and so had to do the little bit of the connection here.
Yeah.
We are also accidentally wearing the exact same shirt. This was not planned. Tyr came from work. I've got my River Flows shirt. He's got his. Marco is also wearing black, so
we're river flowing here, man.
We're river flowing with the show. Marco, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I hope you're doing okay. There's definitely a lot we can dig into. I think, beyond kind of getting into your upbringing and your background and journey with sound recording and kind of, you've got this amazingly successful career now in that sound recording field. You also have a lot of really interesting interests outside of that. And definitely want to dig into that. And I thought maybe a good place to start would be, I guess, more recent in the time continuum, which is, I guess you would have recently just gotten back from a long trip in the Cayman Islands on the set of a movie.
Yes.
I know maybe you can't talk too much about that, but I'd love to hear about your experience, maybe what you've learned, what you did over there.
Sure. I'd be happy to share. It was an interesting start to the year because at the very beginning of the year, I was going through a bit of a difficult time. Work was really slow. I got a little bit sick around Christmas time, and my vibe was kind of low. I didn't know if it was like 2 months of work, of no work, basically. Like it dried up in November all the way through Christmas time. And then coming to January, I was like, what am I it's always slow in January. That's the time of year that there's not much work anyway. So it wasn't anything new. But this time in particular, because there was 2 months prior, there was nothing happening. I was like, oh, this is kind of getting a little bit nervous here. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. So this was in January. So, the travel restrictions weren't quite put in place yet. And I just thought, well, I think I'm going to go visit a friend out in BC and just go to Whistler and take my mind off things a little bit. So that's how the year started. I was in Toronto for a week, took off to Whistler, went snowboarding. It was an amazing time. And then while I was out there, I had a buddy of mine who runs these retreats in Costa Rica. And he called me up and he's like, hey, I see, your industry's shut down. If you want to come down and stay at my retreat for free, all you got to do is just pitch a tent and pay for food. Like you're more than welcome to come down. So that was my plan. I was going to go from BC out on top of mountains, flying straight down to the ocean, and then staying there indefinitely, because I didn't know when work was going to pick up, and if I was going to miss a job or two, it was going to be fine. But my plan was to stay there all of February, and just kind of coast into March if I had to, and just be, this retreat center was on top of a mountain in the middle of Costa Rica, in the jungle, next to a river. And so I go down there. I'm there for like maybe 2 or 3 days, and I get this call at like 10 o'clock at night, and it's from these 2 producers who I've worked with for a few years now, and they're immediately, like, I can tell on their voice that something was up, and they just said, how's it going, and they're like, what's that noise in the background? I'm like, I didn't tell them I was in Costa Rica. I just said, I don't know where I said I was. I was just kind of like in a place where there's just crickets in the background. I'm just outside, right? And then they said, we have this job that has just come up. It's 7 months. It's in the Cayman Islands. You have to let us know your answer by tomorrow.
Like, no pressure.
No pressure, right? And I'm there thinking, okay, well, first of all, like, I don't even know what was going through my mind in that moment. I said to them, I needed one night to decide this. And I remember sitting after the phone call, I went up on this like perched, it was kind of like a watchtower. It was overlooking the entire jungle. And I got into a meditation, and I was just like really feeling into this. And I got this rush of energy, like this excitement that I hadn't really felt in a really, really long time. Like just this burst of like tears and joy, and like I'm like, this is definitely something that I need to do. I would never really say yes to a 7-month job. I think that's like to take myself away from what I'm doing in the city is a little bit too long for me sometimes, because I like to keep my keep saying yes to gigs and keeping myself kind of planted here. But I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen in 2021. Work could have been dry for even longer. Like what better choice did I have than to go do this? So I thought about it that night, and I asked all my friends at the retreat, and they're just like, you should totally go. Like, you should just do this. And that was a really great sleep. And the next morning they call me back, and they're like, oh, you should, do you have an answer for us yet? And I still had to take a cab at like 6:30 in the morning to even make it back to San Jose, to take a COVID test to get a negative result, to like make it back, because we were leaving in less than 2 weeks to the Cayman Islands. So there wasn't even much time to quarantine when I got back. It was like right on that edge, So I rushed out of Costa Rica. I got my negative test, and I got back to Canada. I said yes before I got on the flight, and then it was just basically 2 weeks of being alone in the space here, quarantining and ordering an insane amount of stuff from Amazon being delivered to my door. That's when I realized how valuable having something like Amazon actually is, like, because there was so much prep work I had to do, because even leaving the studio for 6 months, there's constant voiceover sessions here, so I had to write a whole like manual for the space for my engineer in case like he had to troubleshoot when I wasn't here, a whole like installing security cameras and like really trying to get all my bases covered to leave for 6 months, because I've never done that before, and then also revamping my entire audio kit, because some of these scenes had like 9 characters in it, and my recorder didn't have that channel count. So I needed to buy a brand new recorder, rebuild my entire sound system or recording setup from the ground up, all while not being able to leave my house at all. And my sister helped me out a lot. She would go to the audio shop and bring me back. Like, she's like, what are you like? What's in these boxes? Like, you have a ton of stuff in here, So I got all that set up, and that was exciting, because it was a really great excuse to buy a brand new recording device that I've been drooling over for quite a few years now. So that was really cool. And then, also just the excitement of really not knowing what to expect in these 6 months, like truly just going in completely, like with a blindfold on, and just not knowing who I'm going to meet, what experiences I'm going to have, what these movies were going to be. Because they told me over the phone that they were pretty high profile people in these movies, but like I didn't know until until I got there. And then no one really knew. Like we only found out, and I can share this, that Nicolas Cage was in the third movie, like a couple of weeks before we even was set to roll. Like they were still bringing actors on as we kind of went along. So like no one really knew anything. So that's just the beginning of the experience. I didn't even get into it yet, you know?
No, unbelievable. I have so many questions. I mean, firstly, I was definitely curious, like if you'd had a long stretch like that before, and you'd answered that. So I think it's very brave that you would be willing to do something like that. I think especially in like, you know, I hate to bring up COVID, but especially within like COVID restrictions where you're right, like you have all these limitations and you're just going for it and doing everything you can to prepare, knowing that you really can't. There's things that you won't be able to expect and that sort of thing. I'm also very curious about like, because I don't really know much about the field of sound recording specifically for movies and things like that. So I think it's really fascinating that I guess is it true that you're like expected to bring all of the gear, or do they have some gear there, and do you have help and that sort of thing?
Generally, sound recordists are hired based on the gear that they own.
Okay.
So almost every sound recordist, except for like a small handful of people that I know, all own their own gear, and that's actually one of the perks of being a recordist is that you get kit fee, and it's pretty generous most of the time. So like it pays itself off pretty quickly.
Kit fee is
just basically what you rent out your gear per day.
Okay.
So
even though you're the one using it, you're still billing them for the privilege of using your equipment to facilitate their film.
I guess instead of them like renting it from like a facility or...
Yeah. And I mean, even if, I've been offered to use other people's kits on shows or on small projects, and I always turn it down because I've designed and tailored my kit specific to my needs and my style and like how I like to do things. So, it's just like if you were to show up to a concert venue and then you're like, okay, they put you on a board and they're like, hey, go, like mix this band. I mean, I could navigate around the setup, but it would take me a little bit of time to kind of figure out how that in-house technician has everything set up. So it's the same kind of thing. And like, I love modding stuff. I love making things my own. And that's kind of like, that's actually really why I keep doing this it's more so about the gear. I love doing it too, but it's like, I'm just obsessed with audio gear, both in studio and out in the field. So
I was going to ask you, what recorder did you get? I was curious for this big shoot with like the 9 inputs.
So it's a Sound Devices 888.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it just came out. There's a few like add-ons that they put into it. One of the big ones being Dante. So location recorders up until now I've never had Dante capabilities, and now they do. So there's a lot of wireless systems that send and receive audio with Dante through a single Cat6 cable, which would have taken if you have like 16 channels of wireless,
you need like a box snake for that.
Yeah, and now it's just one Cat6 cable. So I never delved into those abilities with my device, but to know it's there. And it was a big deal to decide. I'm like, do I want the version beneath it that doesn't have Dante, which is like $5,000 less, or do I just go up one size and kind of future-proof myself to see, down the road? And I'm so happy I did because, these Cayman Island films are going to be ongoing. And I already know that moving forward, I'm going to have to even revamp my kit again because like what I learned in those 6 months, I mean, I was capable and I did the job well. But there was a few instances where I'm like, I can see now where there's still room for improvement. And one of them being my actual sound card itself, because we were rolling through sand and dirt and rocks. And it's just like, I really pushed that thing to the limit. And I'm like, I'm ready for the next step up, and I'm going to buy it for next time. So
this is one of my questions for you. You said earlier that in those 2 weeks before you left for the trip, you had to sort of get a bunch of gear that you didn't have to prepare for some of the scenes. So does that mean that would they send you a script and then you just have to kind of guess what you need? And then, like what happens if like you arrive
good question,
so far from home and like you don't have what you need?
That was the other thing, right? Like there's no audio shops in the Cayman Islands. And if there was, like they, it might be like a little AV shop. Like I had to really plan ahead of time to make sure that like everything that I was bringing is everything I was going to possibly need. And like, they still weren't able to get me the gear in time for when I got there. I was in quarantine for 2 weeks, and then I had another 2 weeks before we were set to start our first film. And some of the gear arrived like a day before we were set to shoot. And like, it's not like I could have lived without it, but at the same time, I ordered it 6 weeks in advance, and it's not like they had to order it from somewhere else. It was all in the shop. It was just, it just didn't come out fast enough. But, that wasn't even like, for me personally, it was just a matter of, like I already had all my gear with me. This was just having a little bit extra to make my life a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. Like, I use this as a huge opportunity to just basically buy everything I've ever thought I could need and want. And one of them was like, we use time code on set, right? And the last 5 years or so, I've been happy with my sync boxes, but I'm like, I need something that's cutting edge and modern and wireless and can kind of, basically, wireless sync boxes. Basically what sync boxes do is they use something called SMPTE time code to synchronize all the audio and video footage together by sending an audio signal that kind of sounds like an internet dial-up modem. It has a really high-pitched kind of squeal almost. It's really obnoxious to listen to, but that sound actually is what's used to synchronize all these audio and video devices together. And basically the ones that I wanted were they're all wireless now, so you jam one of them and then you just press a button and then they all sync to each other, and they're talking to each other throughout the day, so you don't have to like rejam them at lunch. You know what I mean? Because what would happen would be like, we get back from lunch and I'm like, oh, I just had my coffee, and then I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta jam the sync box again. You know what I mean? And like,
I remember doing that. You have to go up to them.
You came out with me that day.
That's
100%,
right, dude. Man, the fact that they can sync themselves.
It's incredible.
That's awesome.
So little things like that that I used what I was making or what I knew I was going to make as a bit of an excuse to just buy all these little gadgets that's going to make my life so much easier while I was down there.
Tyr actually taught me what timecode was just recently, so I'm glad I know. And for our audience, I'll give you the scoop as well, because I guess this came up recently when we've been doing a lot of video editing and podcasts and stuff, and what I have to do to sync all of the, I guess, different camera angles or different pieces of audio is like just literally do it by hand and try to sync stuff. And there
is an auto align, but like
there
it's
is now
a little sketchy because it doesn't always catch, because if there's a lot of background noise, that type of thing.
Exactly. So, and even that's like 3 angles, shorter pieces of footage, maybe a couple audio. And Tyr was explaining to me, because in the program it also says, you can sync by time code. I'm like, what's time code? And he was saying like how on movies and stuff, like all the different cameras and so much footage and all the audio and stuff, like you guys have that time code such that later when you're editing, everything is actually synced to the exact location. So amazing.
Drag all your video footage in and it just all snaps together like that.
Could you imagine lining up 9 microphones and then however many other things for every scene? And it's like hundreds of scenes and hundreds of lines of dialogue. It's just like, to a point, like you just needed to kind of know when you shot it. So it doesn't even matter when you hit record, you can kind of start them at different times. Yeah. And they're all like automatically folderized for you and stuff. It's amazing. So for someone in his position, you got to, right? Like, cause the editors just want to be able to know that they can drop it in when they're editing the film and be like, I don't have to worry about this because the dialogue is going to be exactly in sync with the camera. So that was very smart to get wireless stuff.
Totally. And if I didn't have wireless, if you don't rejam at lunch, then some sync boxes and some cameras just have a tendency to drift after 12 hours. So, you might get the audio and video just being like off by a few milliseconds over like a certain amount of time. So with them being wirelessly, they just constantly check in with each other and keep nudging themselves back into alignment. So it was a pretty big deal.
Smart.
Yeah.
And good thinking ahead because of your practical experience on set.
Yeah.
To have that revelation of like, no, this is actually smart to get. But like you wouldn't have known that unless you had the practical experience, but also the foresight to think, okay, I can't buy anything right now.
Yeah.
So what is every even edge case that I can run into?
Oh, totally.
And it turns out that was like not an edge case at all. Like that was such a huge thing. So
that was definitely a big one. And then also like, things that I was thinking ahead for were like basically buying brand new like lapel microphones, because like the ones that I've had for years, and like generally when I start a big feature, I want all my microphones sounding super crisp, because they tend to kind of like degrade over time. So I've had some of these mics for a few years, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna basically reset my entire arsenal and having these mics sound the best they can possibly sound, and then just buying things that. I bought this Countryman V6 and it's the smallest lav mic in the world. It's so tiny. I mean, you can hide it exposed in a button and like you won't see it. So just buying little toys like that, things that I didn't really think I would need, but also like I might have to try in some situations, and being down there and not knowing how long things would take to ship. So getting as much, like I use something called Top Stick to stick. It's just little like double-sided sticky tape to hide mics onto people.
Well, it's for toupees, right?
For toupees.
That's why it's called
Top Stick. Yeah. So buying like the amount of Top Stick that I bought, like not knowing how much I was going to use in 6 months, it was like 10 boxes of it. And I still have some. It's been 3 months since I got back and I haven't used it all.
Get into the toupee industry.
I could do that. I have enough to do that. Yeah. So.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I definitely want to hear, if possible, stories about Nicolas Cage, but we can save that a little bit. Okay. I think maybe we'll take it back a little bit because I admire you so much for if I may say so, you're a young guy, and so to have reached this place in your career where you are, even with COVID and everything, like getting these opportunities and being professional and providing so much value to all these kind of big projects. I'd love to know, I guess, and this is a long question, but a little bit about your journey getting there, because I feel like for maybe a lot of young people who may be interested in getting into the field of sound recording in this day and age, I'd love to know a little bit about your journey, and then maybe some tips you might have for people, I guess, maybe just starting out, or even in like high school, who are thinking about what they want to do with their lives or whatever. But let's take it back even further, Marco. What were you like as a kid?
Back. Oh my gosh. Well, if we want to go back that far, I can really thank my mom for putting me into piano lessons when I was like 8, because that basically morphed into me wanting to learn to play the guitar, and then that kind of led into wanting to start recording myself, right? So in high school, actually no, it was even before that. It was in grade 8. I had remember Home Alone?
Yes.
Home Alone 2, he had those that toy you could buy. It was like a talk boy, where I don't know if you remember it in the movie, he was using this like talk boy to talk into and then playing back his voice in slow motion to make himself sound older than he was. So I had that toy, and I used to like my first demo tape ever, I actually used that device to like record myself and then play it back on another cassette player, and then basically multi-track on these like so that was like my first experience recording, and then going into high school, like I played at me and my buddies would just play Blink-182 covers in front of the school, and we would just record ourselves, and it was just like, this was my favorite band back in the day. So and then that like led me to start venturing into like home recording, and that was like 2008. So fast forward a few more years, I went to Ryerson for radio and television broadcasting. And then I met a lot of really cool people at that school.
Ryerson's a university in Canada for you international folks.
And then from there, like I was basically in my last year, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like I was also working at this bar called Duffy's Tavern, mixing metal bands and like country music and like any music that would come through. I did that for a couple years, and then I'd offer to record all these bands. I'm like, guys, I have a studio. You should come and check it out. And like, I think a couple people actually came. But then from there, I got into, I started looking into like live entertainment companies, and I worked for a company called Claire Global, where we would work in warehouses until like, sometimes it'd go until midnight. Like it would go really late, like setting up shows for the ACC and like, running like 300 feet of like audio snake into these big caddies. And it was a pretty brutal job at times. And there's reasons why I had stopped doing it. Because I got a little bit like the lifestyle, I realized it wasn't going to really be for me. But then basically like I worked there for an entire summer. And while I was working at Claire Global setting up shows, I had also landed a boom operator position on a web series, on a kids web series. And funny story, the way this happened, it was kind of cool because I was interning at a post-production facility called Deluxe Post in Toronto. It's not at that location anymore. It used to be around Sherbourne and King, around there. And I met a producer there. And he was like, hey, we need a boom operator for this web series. If you want to come on, you're more than welcome to. And while I was working at Duffy's Tavern, there'd be this, my really good friend, Kirill. I hope you're doing well.
It's Kirill.
Yeah. He would just frequent the bar, and he would always just, he was a sound guy as well. And he would just come up to me and offering me all these like mixing tips while I was mixing these bands. And he was telling me he had been in film for like 10 years at that point. And this was 10 years ago, right? So he was telling me all his experiences on set. And he's like, maybe you can come boom for me one day,
wow.
And I never thought anything of it. He moved away. I hadn't seen him for like a year or so. And then sure enough, he ends up being the mixer on this web series. And like, that was so super comforting for me to be in a, to get onto set and just be at home with this person. Cause he's such a great dude, and he really, he's really passionate about sound, and he taught me everything in those six weeks.
Wow.
Like things that I've learned a lot since, but I mean, the core of like what I learned was in those 6 weeks, and I never got paid for that job. That was like 12 hours a day for like 6 weeks. And there was a bit of there's reasons why people didn't get paid. I still haven't gotten paid, but it was one of the few things that I haven't gotten paid for, but really it was priceless. Like what I learned on that was super priceless. So that was in 2013 when I did that web series. All the while still working at Duffy's, and like I started doing working at a radio station as well. Cool. So just kind of like getting all my bases covered, just throwing myself into absolutely everything, and then seeing what came of it. And it was really the location work that just kind of took off. I was really after that web series, Kirill started passing me jobs, and I used all the money that I saved up while working in live sound and working at the radio station, and I spent like $3,000 on a small like Tascam recorder and like one lav mic and a boom, and that's what I started with.
And start somewhere, right?
Yeah. So I hear people these days asking me, how's a Zoom H6 to do sound with? Like, do you recommend anything more? And I'm like, you can do it with anything. Like it's only gonna, like, better gear is gonna make your job a lot easier down the road, but like any experienced sound technician can use like the most basic of gear and get great results from it.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting, firstly, like how serendipitous it was with the Kirill and him being sort of at your first job there, and then that being not only a catalyst for like a huge educational experience, but then also a lot of your gigs sort of thereafter, and then also showing you that you kind of like this world of location sound. Is that what it's called?
It's location sound, location recording. There's many ways you can you can say it. But I remember it happened more than once, but after those 6 weeks, I'm like, I'm never doing this again.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, that was my experience with it. I liked it, but I also, it's a long haul. Like it's really, you really need to kind of set your life up so that you can go on these super long gigs, because it takes up a lot of your time. And if you can't balance them properly, then, I've heard stories like there's a lot of, people getting divorced. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff because it's addicting too. You kind of want to keep saying yes otherwise. Right. So you kind of, for me, I found a balance in, doing feature work, but then also kind of staying alive in the commercial and corporate world, because you can kind of, generally the days are a lot shorter. Right. You have your weekends. You're not really doing many overnights and things like that. So I got my feet wet in both, and that's kind of where I'm trying to keep it at now. So
a couple terms that I've only learned recently, the location sound. So that's when you're actually on a set, whether it's a commercial or a movie, and you're recording sound of whatever's happening there, whether it's actors or things, people and objects. Yep. And then as well, I only learned recently, like within the last year, I think, what boom was actually. So this is very like common terminology.
You don't know what you don't know, right? Like
sharing,
you're not going to run into it necessarily.
But for the audience at home who, like me, did not know what that was, it's like the guy, and I hope I'm right here as well, the person who holds that big mic above a scene. And I think Tyr was telling me, because when he was on set with you as well, like, don't you have to like hold that for like literally hours? Like I can barely like...
You take breaks. Like you wouldn't hold it continuously like that. And Marco showed me some good techniques to save your muscles on that. But it's very important you hold it right and not be too whatever about it, because if it gets in the shot, you're going to screw the shot up.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to be very mindful of like what the framing is and stuff, and work very closely with the director to make sure that you understand like what the scene is, where the dialogue's coming in. And
it's right. Framing and shadows, reflections.
Shadows.
You're basically a ninja at that point, right?
Yeah, you don't exist. Right? But you're also super important, because that's how you hear what's being said.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying, it's really generally like you never really holding your hands up for more than 15 minutes. I mean, like I've seen some pretty long shots, but generally they don't go beyond that. Okay. But a good technique is to just constantly there's many different positions you can hold the pole, and you're kind of like always like, this is the field goal position. This is actually way more comfortable than this is, because your shoulders and your elbows are locked. But I'm always kind of like every 30 seconds I'm shifting my my posture so that my arms don't get too tired, and I've mastered the art of booming with one hand on my head, which isn't really recommended a lot of the time because it's not really that safe, but I've never dropped it once. Although I don't really, for like big scenes with big actors, I'll never do that. I'll boom with my head if I know that there's not anything that can happen if it slips.
Right.
I've never hit an actor with a boom, just for the record.
So many years, that's impressive.
Yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't be so fortunate. And were you mentioning before that one of the best things to do is to try not to have as many contact points on the thing as you can, like really almost try to make it levitate?
That's right. So there's knuckles on the boom pole where each telescoping portion of the boom screws into the previous portion. So you kind of unscrew that, and there's like these metal knuckles, and basically you want to have as few contact points with your hands. So I can kind of like, sometimes I'll even hold it like with one finger if it allows for that. And I'm kind of counterbalancing it with this. And if it's a really sensitive scene and I don't want to I can't risk making any noise with my hands at all, then I'm like barely touching it. But you need to follow actors around a room, right? You got to really, and I read this in a book. There's a book called Soundman by Richard Patton, which is an amazing, actually, Kirill lent me that book and I still have it. After
if you need it back,
10
Kirill.
years, dude. You have one of my books too, though. So, but he lent me that book, and like I read that like the entire 6 weeks on like kids web series called Kids Town. I read this book, and it kind of brought you through, how to negotiate like deal memos and rates, and then it wasn't really like a book explaining too many technical things. It was more so like firsthand on-set experience, which it still holds up. It's an amazing book, and I think it was the first chapter, like the first paragraph of the first chapter, and it was telling it said that if it's quiet enough, you can hear your pulse vibrate down the boom pole into the microphone. And like that kind of goes to show like any little, you basically, you have to hold it like a feather. And a lot of the times you're running or you got to crouch down into really uncomfortable positions, or you're trying to avoid like a dolly movement, like a camera moving on a set of tracks. And you're kind of like, you're working around everyone else. Usually you're always in the wrong place at the wrong time. Right. And you're just trying to be a little bit like transparent, and that's what makes a good sound man, I think, is to be able to get great audio, and not get in anyone's way, and not get, not piss anyone off.
Right.
So. Yeah.
It's so fascinating to hear, because I, like most people, have really no like knowledge about how movies and things like that are made. I just watch them, and I don't even think about, now that I know like how prevalent, like, I guess, booms are, I don't even know how I thought sound was captured before. I guess I just thought like, I didn't even think about it. And now when I'm watching movies, I'm thinking like, there's a boom guy like right outside the scene. And like, so now I'm thinking like in the actor's mind of like, oh, they're not just like in the scene, they've got like 100 people around them, and just things you don't even think
cameras,
about.
Mics, all this. Like people watching them, like making sure that they're doing exactly the right thing. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure being on set, like as an actor or as a director, as anybody, because you could be the one matchstick that falls down, and then it's like everyone has to do a reset, and that might be 50 people. So you don't want to be the reason that that there's a squeak in the wheel, so to speak.
Or just like you forgot to press record, like.
Oh, that totally happens.
That's happened to me once or twice. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll never forget those days.
No, I mean, it happened. I can safely say once on that entire Cayman Island job. But we had backup audio going to cameras, so it's all good, Yeah. It was only, it was fine. I did panic for a moment, because I'm like, what happened? Why didn't, like, usually it's because I didn't hear somebody say roll or something like that, or I thought maybe, I think we determined that the reason that it didn't. No, you know what happened? It's not that I didn't roll. It's that I cut the take too early. And because I'm using an iPad and I have a soundboard and a recorder, and each one has a stop button on it, I might have hit the stop button on one of those things accidentally. So it cut the take a little bit too early. And I remember getting an email that morning, because they're doing dailies overnight. They're basically taking all the video and audio, they're syncing it overnight, and then sending it to the director the next morning so that they can watch the footage from the previous day. Okay. And if there's ever any issues, they'll usually let you know in the middle of the night. So I woke up to this text saying, why is scene 4C take 1 like short? And I was still like, that was like a week into this production, right? So I'm like, oh man, I don't want to it just, I didn't want to paint a certain image of myself Jeez. But you know what? It was all good. We managed to salvage the take. It wasn't the end of the world. And we did like 5 takes of that. I spoke to the director and the producer, and everybody was cool. So it's just kind of, it happens once in a while. I think it's happened to the best of us. I've heard some stories of people being on like mountains, like Mount Kilimanjaro, and they were interviewing somebody, and like the sound recordist just didn't press record like the entire interview. Or like one time I know a guy that had to leave an audio bag on a helicopter because he couldn't be on the helicopter himself. And that happens sometimes too. Like sometimes I might have to leave my bag in the trunk of a car, where it's too small for me to fit. So I kind of just have to set all my levels and just trust that it's gonna work out. So, this person put it in a helicopter and he just didn't press record, and like,
oh my God.
So it happens a lot.
Makes me feel a little better for like the low stakes of the podcast where we're like, we had the one time where one mic didn't record.
Yeah,
but like,
and ironically, it was my own. I didn't hit record my own microphone, so I ended up having to grab audio off of the camera, which is just awful. But like, it, you know, what are we gonna do, right? Because like either that, we just have to scrap the whole episode.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes, but in your case, it's really like thankful that the camera had the backup audio, even though it doesn't matter if the preamps aren't the best. Like, it's just as long as you can hear it. Like,
yeah, exactly. As long as they even have audio to reference if they had to do ADR or something like that.
ADR is
so ADR is automated dialogue replacement. And it's actually quite common. Like I guess sound recorders can pride themselves on what percentage of ADR a film need, because every film needs ADR. It's just a fact, and basically it's there's many reasons for it. A lot of the time it has to do with audio that just wasn't able to be captured while on location. No matter what we try, there's nothing we can do, and it's just a guide audio at that point. And it happened a few times while we were in the islands. There was one time where there was a scene on an airport runway, and we couldn't turn off the plane. There was like a scene of like three characters walking into a plane having a conversation, and the pilots wouldn't turn off the plane, and the entire scene is just like, like you couldn't hear anything. You just couldn't hear anything. So that was actually one of the funniest scenes that me and my friend Reed Gooby, I miss you. He was my boom operator.
Big up, Reed.
What's up, Reed?
And Adam McKay. He was my first boom op.
Adam.
What's up, Adam McKay?
So me and Reed still laugh about it because it's just such an absurd scene to have to record sound on. Like that.
Right.
That plane was just so loud.
Did they give you a reason why they wouldn't turn it off?
There's a few reasons. Actually, they weren't even going to let us on the plane. There was actually, I won't get into that too much because.
Yeah, say what you're allowed to say.
Yeah, no, it's
like,
okay. It's okay. But like, basically the pilots were just like, nope, we're just not going to do it. We can't turn it off. And there's probably reasons behind it, but no one really knew why. But, and yeah, there was like that. And then there was like this metal door that just kept clanging that we couldn't figure out why that was happening. And it was just, like some scenes are just, you just laugh because, how absurd it is. Like you can't really do your job in these cases. And sorry, I interrupt you, but over time, maybe 6-7 years ago when I was starting out, I probably would have really been stressed out in those situations and like taken the responsibility and the blame for that and thinking it was my fault somehow. But now a lot of the time I'm just like, I can't do anything. Yeah. So.
And this is where they, like, the actors would go, like, into a studio and just, like, say the lines there?
Yeah, so basically they go into the studio, they watch themselves on screen, and then they'll loop a certain clip, and it'll take them a while to, like, get into the headspace again and basically try to mimic themselves and watch themselves on screen and try to replicate how they said the lines.
Yeah.
Which is okay, and, when you're saying just regular dialogue, but a lot of the times there's a lot of like emotion that they're trying to convey. So those are generally like emotional scenes, scenes that have like anger or like even funny scenes are generally the hardest to ADR because it's hard to kind of recapture those moments. And there was quite a few circumstances where I remember the worst part about the Cayman Islands, and it's not a place to shoot it's not really audio friendly because there's so many roosters on that island.
Oh, really?
Like there's just like, it felt like millions of roosters everywhere at all times of the day. And you'd be good for the most part. Like every now and then you might hear one. But when you're doing overnights and you have like most of the night where there's no roosters at all, and then like 4 a.m. comes around and then they all just start going. And there was this one, kind of cottage we were shooting at, and I found out later that there was like an actual chicken coop, like in the house next door. So we couldn't even scare the roosters away. Like usually what I would do, I'd get a PA and just get them to kind of like shoo these roosters away if they became too loud. But in this case, we couldn't. And it was one of the most emotional scenes of the film. It was like the the pinnacle of the movie. It was like the most important scene. And there's just like, and it was quiet and it was just like, soft and they're really like getting into this headspace. And then all of a sudden you just have these super loud roosters distracting them. And I actually had that actor come to me later. He's like, so what are we gonna do about these roosters? Like, are they going to be, like, can you do anything about it at all? And I just said, if it doesn't take place over dialogue, then they can easily take those out. But if it happens over something you said, then that needs to be 80 yard. So I'm curious to see how that scene's going to play out. Yeah.
Oh, what an awful problem to have. It's funny though. You can't help but laugh, right? Because it's just like, it stresses you out in the moment, but it's like, it's just funny. It's like, who has a rooster problem?
Yeah. And I'm dealing. Is it this? Remember those memes where it's like, what my mom thinks I do, what society thinks I do, what my friends think I do, and there's one of a sound recordist, and like, each one, like what my friends think I do is kind of like, I think the picture was working with a bunch of like, high class celebrities and things like that, and then what we really do is just deal with planes and air conditioners and like just things that make annoying sounds. That's kind of what our job comes down to in a way, is just kind of managing the environment to tame it so that it's manageable and you can work. And one of my biggest or one of the hardest parts about my job, especially in the Cayman Islands, is deciding whether or not I want to make the crew suffer and turn the air conditioner off. Because like you kind of got to pick and choose your battles. And like, I know what can be removed in post at this point. But like, if I could make the room as quiet as humanly possible, I will. But I'll always have to kind of give a little bit of, kind of back off a bit, because if I turn the AC off all the time, then the crew's gonna hate me.
You'll be that guy.
I'll be that guy. So you kind of, you really want to pick and choose how much of like what's acceptable at that point, because it's never going to be absolutely perfect, and a little bit of ambience in the scene is going to sound actually kind of natural in certain situations. So like the most, like the worst part is if it's a sound that's intermittent. So if there's a sound like a refrigerator that's on for majority of the scene, and then all of a sudden it just stops, and then you have one shot pointing this way and you have this background noise, and you move to that side, and then there's nothing. So when that's cutting back and forth, like there's ways to work around that. Like people who dialogue edit are amazing at what they do, but it's just basically doing the best you can with what you have available to manage the background. So
I also think it's really interesting that what you mentioned about like you had to, I guess, make some compromises because you are working with other people and they need to be comfortable enough to do what they need to do and what they're responsible for. And just thinking again, like how many people are involved with like any particular production. And I'm curious as well, I think I'd love to know a little bit more about how you guys met, because I think maybe I know this, but I don't. I know that you guys, I know that you had Tyr help you on set a couple of times. But
which was awesome, by the way.
How did you meet in the first place, and like what were those kind of gigs that you'd done together?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll let you take the reins on this one. I don't want to talk too much.
Well, I mean, Long and McQuaid. I met Tyr at Long and McQuaid because he works there, and that's my local. Like, if I'm not buying stuff at True Audio, which is where I buy all my location sound supplies, I'm at Long and McQuaid buying all this. And you actually sold these microphones to me that day.
Yes.
Yeah. These ones right here?
Oh, yeah.
These ones.
Super solid choice. You're going to love these ones, Marco.
Yeah. I mean, don't they sound amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it really good when you get close to the microphone?
Yeah, it's so incredible.
For those folks at home, I guess I don't really mention this too much because, well, I don't know. Tyr is a man of many talents as well, and I don't typically put pro audio salesman extraordinaire in the bios of you. But
I appreciate that.
But yes, Tyr's day job when he's not helping me with my millions of creative projects, he gets up and goes to work and sells pro audio gear and mics like these and meets people like Marco. So it's a beautiful thing. thing.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful thing. And I think that's one of the main things that stood out to me about Tyr, is that he's just incredibly knowledgeable, super helpful, and just kind of, dude, like any question that I had about any piece of gear, he just had such an extensive, background in it. And I learned a lot in those times at Long McQuaid, like asking you questions about things, and like you're so helpful. And I think the conversation just kind of evolved, and I started talking about like what I do, and then he showed some interest. I'm like, well, you should come out one day and check it out. So I brought you to a couple of things.
Yeah, to a couple shows, and they were cool movies too.
Yeah.
Like not just like little nothing gigs where like if I screwed up, it would have made you look really bad.
Right.
So I'm glad that I didn't do anything too bad. I did drop your buddy Darren's Lectra
really?
receiver once. He wasn't too pleased about that.
Okay.
But everything was fine.
Okay.
That was the only screw up I had there. And
I mean, it happens, man. Like I've dropped those things all the time.
Yeah, they
you
seem
don't want
pretty
to drop
sturdy.
them, but
No.
like they're actually on the box itself. It says "not fragile," and there's a picture of one dropping off a building. So like they're built like tanks, but every now and then they do break. And I had a couple instances in the Cayman Islands where like I remember. So my first boom op, Adam McKay, I think when he plugged it into the microphone, like it barely, I started to call you out, man, but like it basically just didn't clip in, and I think it dropped like a foot and it stopped working, and that was my only wireless transmitter.
No.
Like, so from that point forward, we had to go wired, and like I didn't have a problem with it. But, going from a wireless boom to having to run 100-foot cable all of a sudden is not very fun. Like you get used to the wireless on features. Like it's such a perk. And it was kind of funny because I'm like, it's kind of an initiation to be a boom op. You got to go cabled first, and then then you work your way to wireless. But he kind of went backwards. So like for like 2 weeks we were going wired, and it was such a pain because like we were on different floors, and we shot in this mansion in this first movie, and like you're always trying to find a place that's out of the way. So you're always running these super long cables.
Right, because you can see it on the ground and stuff. Like you have to be very strategic.
You got
about
to be
that.
really careful where you run. So even that in itself, to have a cable going to set, you want to be careful because like sometimes, if it's a wide shot and then they're showing the entranceway of a room, and you got to hide your cables. So I remember, so I ordered another transmitter, and like the first day we used that one. It was for a scene where there was a water gag involved, so it was like fake rain, and basically the scene was so Ron Perlman was the lead actor in this movie. He's Hellboy, and there was a scene where he was like banging on this this truck, this bakery truck. It was what the main vehicle was in the movie. And there's just like a ton of water just pouring on him. And I'm like, I want to capture that audio. Like it's going to be a risky shot, but like I can still do it, like we can wrap, that's what you use these non-lubricated condoms for. You just wrap the transmitters in the condoms. Yeah.
Wow.
Like especially on like a show like Top Chef Canada that I worked on for a few seasons. You just wrap the transmitters in condoms.
Because
of
cooking
the
oils and crap.
Pro
and
tip.
whatever else.
more so because of the sweat.
Right.
And they're like location audio branded condoms. There's like
No
a boom
way.
operator on the package.
That's so funny.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. So I like double wrap this transmitter. I'm like, there's no way the water's going to get in this thing. It's only for one shot, And sure enough, like it was 3 seconds. 3 seconds. I like,
oh no.
As soon as I got the mic back, the whole condom was filled with water. It was like the transmitter was like swimming in a little fish tank.
Well,
She's pregnant.
And then it just like, crapped out on me in that moment. And I was like I showed Adam, well, cause he couldn't believe it. I'm like, dude, I just broke the transmitter. And this was the second one we got shipped in.
God.
So we were in disbelief. Like it was like 4 a.m. We're just like going to crash out. We're so tired. And he just started laughing and he couldn't believe it. So then we're cabled again all of a sudden. Right. And I was going to ship both of them to Electrosonics in New Mexico. And then I basically just, they said, put it in a bag of rice first to see if it's going to dry up. And sure enough, it did. Before I was like, it was in the box ready to ship out. And then or no, it was in the bag of rice. And before I was going to put it in the box to ship out, I'm going to try this out. And then sure enough, it turned on. It lasted the rest of the 4 months.
Wow.
But until we got back here, like usually what happens is if there's any sort of like salt in the water, like it was clean water, but what happens is if there's dirt or salt in the water, then it'll corrode the chips over time, and that's what happened. So when I got back here is when it started to kind of cause me some problems. So yeah, I had a lot of gear crap out on me down there. There's like mics and transmitters and like, you know, yeah, you kind of want to have backups in that case. That's why I went ahead and ordered all this extra stuff because like, you know, when you're down there and you're like, you know, your recorder can just go down. Like, what are you going to do? You got to have a backup.
That's true. So, I'm assuming you brought your old one with you too.
I brought
like,
my old
just
one
to
too.
make sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because being anywhere tropical, anywhere salty, anywhere like high, anything that's not just like at a normal sea elevation is really hard on your gear. Because people who bring stuff to Brazil, for example, and their gear comes back moldy and they have to get it cleaned out because of all that, because it's like 95% humidity all of the time. And it makes all of the insides of your microphone, especially the grills where you talk, but anywhere, it gets rotten on the inside. And then by the time you're done your shoot, if it's like 6 months or we show like a tropical movie, you're going to be in for quite a treat cleaning all of your gear out after that. And your bags and stuff too, like all the straps and whatever, all this like gunk and mold and stuff that grows on there too.
I'm still finding sand places like in my, you know, certain cases and stuff like that. Like it cleans stuff out, but like there's always going to be a surprise like dirt here and there. And so try your best to maintain all your equipment, but that's why it's so expensive to buy and then maintain. And like the reason the kit fees are what they are is because like, it's an expensive department to like own and maintain all your gear for. Like things break all the time. Like I can't even tell you, like there's like anytime I go to True Audio, I'm never spending less than $200. Like it's insane sometimes. Like when you go there and you realize that what you have to fix, I'm like, wow, this it's a reason. There's a reason why, you know, sound like location audio rates are what they are, because it's a lot of work to just maintain everything.
Yeah.
So especially the quality that they want too for like a feature, it has to be top stuff.
Totally.
And to have to keep replacing and fixing top stuff is gonna be top dollars too.
It's so expensive, and it only keeps getting more and more expensive.
Really,
you know?
I would have thought it would be coming down at some point.
Well, I mean, like location. I mean, audio gear in general. You know, lucky for us is that it doesn't ever really go obsolete. As opposed to like camera equipment, what they're always coming out with better and better cameras. Like you can still use microphones from the 60s. You can still use like transmitters from the mid 2000s and they're still going to work, but you know, your workflow and just like, you're not going to get as many of the benefits as some of the newer gear has, but it still holds its value. But it seems like every year or so, it's like, oh, Electrosonics, like buy it all now because they're going to go up like 3%, you know, like, and that has added up over time. And like, even my wireless setup is pretty modest. I only have 6 because of the boom, and then 3 dual channel receivers. And then I got all my antennas and stuff like that. And it's still like a $23,000, like it's, you know, it's basic stuff, but it's expensive to even get to that point where you have this equipment to get yourself to the places that you need, you know?
Well, I think it's really, interesting that like at the start of your journey, even before you kind of thought you'd be interested in getting to Location Sound and kind of growing your career there, that like what I guess got you started was taking any opportunity that kind of came your way and trying different things to figure out what you like, because I find that it's so hard to know what you want to do and what you like doing. And I know that a lot of people, for example, in whatever field, especially if they're younger and trying to get started, you know, maybe they've gotten an education and then they can't seem to, I guess, quote unquote, like get a break or find a job or get a gig, and just getting that ball rolling seems to be so difficult for so many people. And I just I really admire you for, you know, having come so far and trying so many different things and doing, you know, smaller gigs, doing gigs where you didn't get paid and like all that kind of stuff to eventually get to where you are now. So I think that's super, super commendable and inspiring.
Yeah.
I also want to, I guess, speaking of these microphones and this amazing gear here, it's just so nice to be in this beautiful podcast studio. For those folks watching on the video, like this, even just this like background, I believe you built this yourself.
I did build this myself. Man. I've been wanting to, like create, well, first of all, I wanted to treat the room. So I built all these sound panels myself and did a bit of research.
They look
in
great,
that.
man.
Thank you very much. Yeah, they work
very
really
pro.
Well. And like the last thing I wanted to build was a diffusion panel. And I was looking at like different DIY projects, like things I can do myself. And there's a few different styles I could have chosen. But, as I was looking online, I was just mesmerized by this one like diffusion panel that this company in France made. And it was like one of the most beautiful, like eye-catching designs I've ever seen in my life. And then the YouTube link basically said, oh, build this one yourself. Here's a link to the app. You can download it, and then it gives you the instructions on how to do it. So I was actually I didn't really believe it at that point, because I'm like, can it really recreate and emulate what these acousticians and these designers in France actually made? And it was really just about like. So the app was really cool because it let you. There's many different diffusion panels that you could choose from, like different types of styles, and one of the presets on it was the exact model and make of this company called I think it's D'acoustic, and the way it worked was like you basically put in the dimensions of like how big you want the panel to be. And then how thick the wood you're using is. And like mine was going to be, it's like 4.5 feet wide and 4.5 feet high. And when I calculated it, it's like you need 800 meters of wood, right? Which is like an insane number. And I'm like, well,
it's hard to picture that much wood.
It's a lot of wood. I'm like, well, I'm like trying to look online or at Home Depot, like how much does 800 meters of pine cost? And it's like $10,000 or something like that. So I was talking to my dad, because he builds houses, and he was able to source some wood. And he's like, well, why don't you use poplar? It's like pretty cheap considering. And I think 800 meters of it was like just over $1,000.
It's a lot better than 10.
Yeah, big difference.
A lot, yeah, it's way different. And like basically, so the wood came in 19 millimeters. So I put in that number into the app, and then it just ran this algorithm, and it gave me all the sequence numbers. And basically, there's 5,329 pieces here. And basically, I just followed this like template, and I didn't know what it was going to look like. I was just hoping it would come out like this, but basically it's just, follow these number sequences, start gluing things together. And it didn't give me a picture at all. It's like,
really?
Yeah. So I was just like hoping it would turn out. Yeah. And it did. Yeah. This was my quarantine project.
Yeah.
This
quarantine
was
project.
what I
Nice.
did. Took me 1.5 years of planning, and then 5 weeks of gluing, wood together for like 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, this looks like it took forever to put together. I love that.
Yeah.
And what does a diffusion panel do? Again, for the people like me who don't actually know.
Tyr.
Yeah, sure, I can answer that. It's actually simple, because like absorption is what it sounds like, right? The sound gets stuck inside of something. Diffusion doesn't make the sound get stuck. It moves it around in a more random way. Because if you walk into a completely empty room, how it sounds like flutter echo. And a lot of people at home, if you clap your hands really loud, you hear like a ta-ta-ta-ta-ta sort of thing from the sound actually hitting the floor and the ceiling a bunch of times. If you have enough of this, or if you combine it like Marco did, where there's absorption plus diffusion, it means that when the sound hits this, because there's all of these little edges everywhere and all the pits and divots, the sound in a pretty random way, or quasi-random way, will get reflected and moved around in a lot of tiny little patterns, such that the kind of reverberance you get from it is smooth. There aren't peaks in it. There aren't what's called wolf tones. where you'd have like specific notes that are really emphasized. If you're talking, some rooms have like a resonance to them, or musical instruments do the same thing, guitar amps and that kind of thing. So the point of this is that you're really tamping down on those extra tones that get extra boosted depending on the size and shape of your room and what kind of sound is coming from within it. For it to have a massive effect, it has to be at least this big and combined with other types of things. You can't just diffuse, because your room would still be very live sounding, maybe being like pleasant, but you don't want it to have tons and tons of reverb, even if it's nice reverb, unless it's like a concert hall or something. But even concert halls are diffused like this, but huge 1 foot by 1 foot blocks, right? If you go to like Opera House or like a big place that's been acoustically thought about, they don't have very much absorption there, if at all. Everything is diffusion, but they've thought about, okay, well, if the sound originates on the stage, how long would it take to go from here to here? And how much diffusion or what type of diffusion we need to do to move it strategically.
Right.
So you can get really scientific about how you want to move sound around a room and allow the audience in the back to hear it. So diffusion can achieve a lot of interesting results.
Well, and in base level terms, you're basically saying you're reducing like echo in a room.
You are making the echo more pleasant.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's more of a smooth tone rather than like a distinct flutter or a distinct like moment in time. Like if you clap your hands in a canyon, for example, or yell into a canyon, you'll hear that back.
Yeah.
And this, if you want to think about it in those terms, removes that hear back. It's more of like a smooth fall off is what you're going to get. Still the same amount of reverb in the room, but instead of being a distinct tone, like an echo, it's more of like it tapers off.
So I guess that's useful for like this area where you have it set up for podcast stuff. You also have this incredible table that's you custom built, and you put these like great. All these microphones are directly in the table, which I've never seen before. And then kind of going back to like the sound treatment and stuff, there's also off camera this other separate room where I guess you have like there's a vocal booth.
There's a vocal booth in there. So there's also treatment that I put in there as well. And really this room specifically is for, playback and mixing. So I wanted to do my best to, create a room that just is super balanced, sounds really good. It's like great for voice and podcasting, and it also just looks really cool. It makes you feel really comfortable.
It looks so cool. Like for someone like me who thinks like studio and gear and stuff looks really cool, but I don't really exactly understand how it works. I just I love the vibe. On the other side of these cameras, what you don't see is this huge just like area with the screens and computer and mixing boards and things and knobs, and it looks really sick.
Like you feel like you're in a studio.
Yeah, man.
That's the important part.
Yeah, and like the lighting and everything. You've got crystals. What was your sort of journey and objective with this space? And I guess like, do you also rent it out to other people to use and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I mean, really starting this. Like the studios, after everything I've done, the studio's been here the longest, right? So this took me, 2008 is when I started. So it's been like 13, close to 14 years or so of just kind of like, this used to be my bedroom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's my bed in here. There's, and over time, like that slowly transitioned. I took my bed out, and then only a couch that turned into a bed. And then like now there's like no bed in here at all, right? Like, it took me a while to kind of transform this space into how I saw fit, and it's taken, a lot of time and energy, and like trying to do things myself. So I mean, everything you see here, including the desk and the vocal booth and everything is like custom designed, because like the ceilings are pretty low in here. So even the door for the vocal booth, like it's like a really wide glass door that had to be custom ordered and made, and like it's just like all these little things that you wouldn't really think about. Even there was one year that my friend and I tore down our entire ceiling and then basically hung it on these like Z channels, so it's a floating ceiling, so you don't hear any footsteps from upstairs. Like there's a lot of little things that took a while to get to this place, and it feels good to kind of like just be at a place now where I'm like, I'm done for a little while, because half of it is just trying to find ways that you can improve the look and feel of the place, and also improve functionality. And it's kind of, maintaining and keeping all your software and computers and things up to date too. And that's why I've invested in like a company like RME where their drivers aren't really dependent on like software and hardware upgrades on like Apple and Windows. It's more so like so little things like that where I'm putting my money into places that are gonna basically save me money in the long run and
That's a huge lesson, right? Because if you get the good stuff,
that's what
it feels expensive at the beginning, but then the fact that you're not having to constantly upgrade it and stuff, like it is cheaper to get better stuff in the long run. If you're serious about something, now if you're just kind of dabbling, don't ever do that.
Yeah.
Get stuff that's commensurate to what you think you're going to do with it.
Right.
But in the same way you would never learn an instrument on like a high-end custom shop guitar, not unless you just had money to set on fire, but like you can learn the same way you got that little Tascam recorder.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have made sense for you financially and just like gig wise to get anything other than that.
Exactly.
So,
it's like the money I had at the time is in the skill set I had and basically, growing into the equipment and then kind of investing in things that I knew were a little bit out of my my realm of like use at that point, like the sound devices recorder I bought for the Cayman Islands. Like there's features on that thing that like I'm not using right now, but I know that putting that extra little bit of money at the start is going to help me out in the long run. And that kind of like that's kind of what happened here. Like I really built this place initially. It was really just funny enough, it was just to record my own music, and then like it just kind of slowly over time just started to gain a little bit of traction. And the way this place kind of came to be, I back in 2013 or 14, I was doing internships in recording studios. I did one at Pirate Toronto, which is like a voiceover radio recording facility, and then I did one at Deluxe Post, and then I was working at a place called or I did a few sessions at a place called DB Audio Toronto, which is a voiceover studio in the East End. And I met my buddy Neil McDonald there, who was like their main engineer.
Big up, Neil.
Yeah, man. and he was working there for quite some time. And actually, he was there for a long time. I think he was with Dave for like 13 years or something like that. And a couple years later, he went freelance, and he basically started seeing all these like pictures coming out of my space, and he's like, dude, you got to like bring me to your spot at one point, and he lived like 5 minutes away from here. Right. So he came over, he really liked it here. He started to recommend some of the people that would frequent DB Audio, and a couple of them, there's a company that I work with called Power of Babel. They needed a new spot to call home. And they needed, something that was like convenient and kind of in the West End and friendly and just kind of like, up to standard. And they like Neil brought them over here that one time, and they loved it. And they've like over the last 3 years, we've done a lot of work together, and this place has turned into we're primarily a voiceover studio where we do language versioning.
It feels like that because the way that it sounds in here is so clear for dialogue. I noticed that right away. I'm like, oh, you could totally cut vocals in here.
Yeah. And that's really what it's, thank you. Yeah.
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 That's awesome. And I was actually, I think just because this is like a curiosity of mine, we talked about it a little bit before off camera, but I don't think I know I can't remember what software people use to sync dialogue either remotely. Because I know it's like a challenging thing to get the lines to line up with the picture,
right. Yeah.
and not all the actors are always in the same place. Like what do you use to facilitate that?
So there's a software that was brought to my attention called VoiceQ, and what that does, and I'm working with a director named Simon D. Scott.
Shout out Simon D. Scott.
And he's like super knowledgeable about this software, and he's like one of the few people in Canada really who knows it as well as he does. Like it's a very small company out of New Zealand. Not many people even know about it, I don't think. And it's a really kind of complex software where what it does is it allows you to take a video source, like whatever video you want to use to overdub your dialogue. So if it's like we were doing a kids kids animated television series. And similar to ADR, the voice actor will watch the little animated cartoons in real time and then have to synchronize their voice, whether it be in French or any other language at all, in time with the visuals. So what this software does is it takes the script and it kind of overlays it over top of the video, and then it plays it in real time. So when they watch the video, they can see the script in time with the audio transients and waveforms. So every single vowel is like time stretched exactly to how how you would say it when you're repeating it, kind of thing. And it's called Rhythmoband, and it's a really neat, really cool software. It's kind of it was new for me at the time, and it's a finicky software. Like we're learning to work with some of the the situation at hand with COVID and like not being able to be like there's been a lot of remote work that has come from this. So what Simon does is he stays in his studio in Montreal. He zooms in here, but also he's actually controlling one of our computers here, the iMac, which is running voice queue. So he's screen sharing that one. He's running voice queue from his computer in Montreal. And then voice queue actually controls Pro Tools on a separate computer via a MIDI loop. And that's kind of how like the computer with Pro Tools communicates with the computer with voice cue on it, so that we're both in sync. So I hit play, I hit record, it affects his computer in Montreal. He hits stop, it's stopping. So it's kind of
super cool.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And to get that working, to get that dialed in took like months of just like figuring out how to best configure it, because there's many ways you can do it. Like some people use Wi-Fi, some people use all these different options, and MIDI just seemed to work like off the bat. It's still kind of finicky, and like being in the Cayman Islands, like I had to like troubleshoot over the phone a lot of the time, and we got it to work. And yeah. And answer your question, Tyr, another software that people are using these days is called Source Connect, and that's it's a replacement for ISDN lines, which were big in the 90s, where like recording studios had their own dedicated telephone line to send and receive audio from, if you're anywhere in the States, sending and receiving audio in another recording studio in different places around the world.
Right.
The Source Connect is like the internet equivalent of that. And it's kind of like an official replacement for ISDN lines, and it's a pretty cool software. And a lot of voiceover actors and actresses are kind of, everybody owns it now, so people are just setting up at home, and then they'll patch into a recording studio who also has Source Connect. But then the thing is that then they have to make sure that they have a good enough microphone, a good sounding room. And it's, I've worked with some voice actresses recently who, it's challenging because like, it's convenient to not have to travel to a recording studio to get and do your work, but also, it's not always perfect in these apartment complexes where you might have like construction happening or stuff like that. So it's always, it's kind of tricky in that sense, Yeah.
I mean, I think it's amazing that just hearing about this kind of like remote workflow kind of thing that there are ways where you've been able to adapt, I guess, in the environment of COVID. I hate to bring up COVID again, but I guess also I'm just thinking back to what it must have been like at the start of the pandemic, where things were really, really shut down before we kind of knew what was going to happen, have things open up again, and that sort of thing. And I guess in your line of work, where a lot of it is traveling to a film or a TV set, commercial set, and now I guess was like none of that happening for a period of time, and like slowly kind of came back.
There was a good 3 months where like the film industry was as dead as could be. It was kind of shocking to just having been in such a grind for so long, and just like it was March. So we were ready to, like, spring was going to be right around the corner. I was ready to gear up and get back into the film set kind of grind. And I was prepping myself for that. And I remember I had landed a feature at the last week of March. It was going to be like 12 days in Hamilton. It was, I remember we were still, like, you know, COVID had been a thing already at that point, and like there were certain industries kind of shutting down. Like my sister was working at an event coordinating kind of space, and that shut down. And I'm like, there's no way it can happen to the film industry too.
Famous last words.
Yeah. And I was like, we were ready to start rolling. Like it was the night before we were supposed to start the 12 days on this movie. And then sure enough, like we got the email saying production's been canceled. I'm like, oh shit, it's only gonna be 2 weeks, you know? I thought that's kind of like,
I remember that, right? Because, it's only going to be a month.
yeah. And then it just kept, like, the months kept, moving forward. And then, like it was a good, like all of May was completely dead. June, I had my first gig in July. So, and coming back onto set that one day, it was for a commercial, and like, it just felt like, it was like this Twilight Zone. It was kind of like, it was a very weird place to be. It was kind of like, coming onto set with masks and stuff like that. Like we're used to it now, but I remember that first day was just, you didn't really want to touch anything. You're just like, this kind of feels, we're still navigating through this and figuring it all out. And so that's how that kind of started. And it picked up again, like later on that summer. So the gigs started to kind of trickle in a little bit more. And then I ended up doing like two Christmas movies later that summer, back to back. And that was Kirill. He brought me out to boom for him on those movies. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
thanks, Kirill.
Kirill,
hookups,
man.
Major hookups.
Yeah. So
man,
definitely a different environment to have to navigate, especially now, with the vaccine mandates and things like that. There's been jobs where I need to show proof of vaccination to get in. And like, this is sort of a mixed bag, like some places require tests, some places require proof of vaccine, some don't. It's just kind of, it depends on the production company and how they run their ship, so.
Well, I think it's safe to say you're working in an industry with, I guess, was hit with extra uncertainty around, in particular, the beginning.
Yeah.
This is, I think, a good point to bring it to perhaps a conversation around meditation or things that
good idea.
Maybe help, relieve your anxiety, or if you ever have feelings around, just like the uncertainty, confusion, despair, like all that kind of stuff. I feel that you must be,
it's a big topic.
How do you relax?
How do you live optimally?
Because your life's so busy, man.
I know. I mean, it's really, that's a tricky, it's an interesting thing to talk about, because it just depends on like a lot of different things, like how dedicated and devoted I am to my meditation practice. And like, sometimes I'm in a really great headspace. And I remember, like, there's been, feature films where like I've stuck to my practice, both, 20 minutes in the morning before set, and then 20 minutes or half an hour at lunch for weeks and weeks on end. And as soon as you kind of get into that flow, it's just like working out. You kind of want to maintain that. And if, sometimes if your schedule is not really being friendly to you and not allowing for that consistency, then you kind of take a step back from your practice too. And then that can kind of be hard, because you just finished 2 months of like being so on your game and like really allowing the practice to flourish and take you into some really beautiful, blissful spaces. And then all of a sudden it just stops all of a sudden because of like your schedule. But I find that like, it doesn't really have too much to do with the schedule, because if you're in a good place, then you kind of just make time for it. There's like, no matter what happens, like you will always make time for it. But then sometimes I find, I'm just way more like I'll wake up and I'll just, my mind is preoccupied with the thing I was doing the night before. And then I'll be like, I'll do my practice tomorrow kind of thing. And then, days will kind of moving into weeks. And I'm like, I haven't meditated in what seems to be like a month or so. It feels like you take a step backward at that point, but you're just kind of flowing with what is being asked of you in that moment. And like after kind of doing this and witnessing what my cycles have been and how devoted and dedicated I am to it, and then taking a step back and then getting back into it, it's like seasonal almost. Like you kind of end up in the springtime when the the snow is melting and things are coming alive again, you kind of just you're more inspired to want to get back outside and like get to the park and and then do it every single morning. And then sometimes like in the winter time, like you're kind of stuck inside and it's hard to just sit still and to meditate, I find sometimes. So it kind of, there's a lot of different things that determine how dedicated I am to that. But
you mentioned you were doing it for, I think you said 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, I basically I started to explore meditation and spirituality in like 2012. And this was kind of like I was just in a bit of a transitional period in my life where I was still, hanging out with people and like still friends of mine now, but we were out partying and drinking and it just led to some situations that weren't really like I knew weren't in my best interest, and I still went and explored those situations and like hanging out with certain people and things like that, and then I realized at one point I'm like I saw this whole group of people who were like meditating and just like having amazing experiences, and I was really curious about what that was. So I started to like the way that I did it was I started to go to like certain, I guess, metaphysical kind of bookstores and things like that, and then just started to hang out with people that I was aspiring to want to be like, or just offering my services to them really. And I remember I met a few people at some of these bookstores who were looking for to record guided meditations.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, cool, I got a studio, like you should totally come and do that. And I found that was like not only helping with, it was like I was meeting people who were already into this kind of stuff. I was helping them. They were teaching me, and it was distracting me from the things that I was trying to get away from doing. Right. And that was really the whole point of doing that, was to kind of, transform my life and to move it and to just change that trajectory this way. And like this, like everything you kind of see here has just been, riding that same kind of tip, I guess, like that desire to want to like continuously expand and grow and like see where my heart, my mind, like everything just takes me based off of this like intuition I have that like everything's just going to, lead to the next best thing. Right.
It's important to have that confidence in yourself, right? Like to know that you can make the best decisions for yourself. Yeah. And I think that speaks volumes about your character. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I'm really inspired to hear that. And it's one of those things where meditation itself, I find that it's definitely benefited me a lot, but I find that I've had a hard time to firstly like express the benefits. Particularly to people who are skeptical. So for example, my mom, I love you, Mom. She's a very high-powered person, very driven, very like analytical, intellectual, but also loves, arts and culture and that kind of thing. She's a computer programmer. But she's also adventurous and all these things. And meditation is not something she's ever done. And I think in her mind, when I've talked to her about it, she's said things like, well, it seems like if you're meditating, you're ignoring your problems by, I guess, going into this state where you're just not thinking about your problems. So part of her skepticism is that it feels like it's like an irresponsible thing to do. So that's one thing. Wow. The other thing that she'll say in a similar token is that it's kind of like drugs where you're just getting high to like bliss out and again kind of forget your problems. And I thought that was an interesting point of cynicism, which I can certainly like empathize with, because, you know, there were many periods in my life early on where even just if I came across somebody who was like nice and positive, I thought that they were either faking it or lying to themselves and that kind of thing. So that was a different state of mind. And so I was just trying to be compassionate with her state of mind, but I also don't want to give up on it and just kind of, I also don't want to be preachy and be like, no, you should meditate. It's great. Like I want to, I guess, be able to express maybe in her terms, like what it is or what kind of benefits or what you're actually doing. I'm curious if you have any, I guess, tips or thoughts on that.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, it was quite a journey of like, and I'm still on the path now of like, basically I'm still rediscovering like what meditation has to offer, even after having like some incredibly explosive, beautiful experiences doing it. But, you know, when I was first starting it, I actually was listening to binaural beats a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And if for those who don't know what binaural beats are, they're just a series of tones that you listen to. There's like one sine wave in this ear and another sine wave in this ear, and they're offset by like a few hertz. And what it does is it's called brainwave entrainment. So it's trying to mimic like brainwave activity and entrain your brainwave frequencies and kind of like, I guess influencing them and bringing you into deeper states of relaxation by doing it like that. And that's kind of how I started with it. So I was using like guided audio, like not really guided meditations per se, where people are like, oh, you know, pretend you're on a beach or like things like that. It's more so just, like extreme focus and really just, you know, I used to stare at like a candle flame before bed and then witness like where that flame, you know, when you look at the sun for too long and then you can kind of see it as you close your eyes. So there was a meditation that I found online that the intention was to look at a candle flame and then using that focal point of light, like when you close your eyes, like that's what you focus on, you know? And then in addition to the binaural beats, I had just some like insane out of body experiences. Like right off the bat, I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here, but this is pretty intense. And that kind of more like evolved into, learning different types of breathing practices. And that's really, I think, that's where people's, like for anybody who wants to get into meditation, like I think a lot of the focus should go towards the breathing. And then after you've done like a certain amount of breathing and kind of, push yourself into these experiences where it can kind of get uncomfortable. Then after that, like you will end up in a meditation, like a place for meditation. And I've done, I don't know if anybody's heard of pranayama or alternate nostril breathing or things like that. So there's a sequence of breathing practices that I learned while I was in India. I went to travel down there and I was dating somebody who brought me to this ashram and like, it was super cool. Like I learned a lot of the techniques that I do now for the one time I went down there, and like I've been doing them for 5 years. And it wasn't until, even when I was learning them, I was like, I don't even know what's it good for? Like, I'm not really that interested in it. I only came for this, like with this person because she was the one that was interested and I kind of tagged along. And
classic story, right?
Yeah. And like, it wasn't until we parted ways where I'm like, oh, right. I remember those practices. Maybe I should give them a shot. And it was like, basically, I can't explain to you what happened to me this one summer after like waking up and then doing these breathing techniques every single morning for like weeks and turn into months. But like, it was really just like this small window of a few weeks, where like, not only was I having like, was my body becoming relaxed, but I started to get these like really blissful experiences, kind of like just coming out of what felt like nowhere. Really, it was just it just felt like weeks of just like insanely high vibing, joyful like joyful experiences. And I've continued with these breathing practices for the last 3 years, and they're still part of my everyday practice in the morning. So like when I wake up, on a good day, I'll go to the park. I'll find a comfortable spot. I live in the West End, so Dufferin Grove is like my go-to in the morning. In the summertime, it's beautiful because it's like I'm not the only person that shows up. There's like maybe sometimes 5 or 6 people, and we're all kind of like in different areas of the park, but we're all I've seen other people doing alternate nostril breathing too. And it's like being in nature first thing in the morning, watching the sunrise, doing the sequence of these specific techniques, and taking yourself through an experience where like, some of the breathing techniques are a little bit more intense than others. And I've done, workshops where, we'd spend, 3 hours every morning for 10 days doing Nadi Shodhana, which is the alternate nostril breathing, from 4:30 to 7:30 every morning. And if you've ever tried breathing through a straw, like it's such a, it's excruciating. Like it was, I remember the first time I did it, it was before COVID. So it was with a group of people, and one girl's nose started bleeding. Like it was super intense for her, she had to obviously stop. But like, I remember, it feels like you're suffocating and you can't breathe, but you're kind of pushing through that. And, it was an intense experience. But after doing that for 10 days, it kind of, I finally realized, after like, I think it was like the second last day, like what we're going for, what we're trying to achieve by doing these breathing practices and meditation. And it's actually way simpler than many people think. I think a lot of people think that meditation is something that, you need to take a step back from your thoughts and you need to clear your mind. And like, I don't know, that was a learning lesson for me where every time I thought of something, I was like, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. There's a thought. I'm trying to clear my mind, right? But it's really just allowing your thoughts to come up and not becoming attached to them and allowing one to flow into the next and just kind of seeing where it takes you. Because like the more you allow that to happen, the less attached you become to them and the more focused you become on your body and your breathing. And then your thoughts are actually they're kind of like operating up here. You're not even paying attention to them anymore. You're just paying attention to like what you're feeling and what your body's telling you. And it's in those moments where I've had just like some beautiful experiences,
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Can you compare your life having integrated like on and off your meditation practices, breathing practices versus a time in your life when you weren't doing that, and what are the kind of overall kind of benefits you might feel from having integrated meditation into your life?
That's a really great question. Because, oh man, it's I think one of the benefits of having, people keep saying like meditation and breathing and things like that, and yoga, it's like, it's going to change your life, right? No matter how you look at it. But it's really because you're replacing these habits, these things that like don't serve you with the actual practices and techniques and all of that. So, looking back to where I was at before I even ventured down this path of meditation and mindfulness, I'll still get flashbacks of experiences that I've had, that were kind of, darker parts of myself that like I was really, like not really so proud of. but that were still something that I'm still facing now. Like, it's not like I can just walk away from these darker aspects of who I am. They're always kind of there, and they're always actually like you're kind of trying to harness both at the same time. So like the more you want to get into a high vibing, blissful state, it's really, you don't really like, you want to go there because it feels really good, but you also just want to stay planted and not venture too far in that direction because it's going to bounce back into the opposite experience. And it always does. There's always like cycles of depression and then, moving into higher vibrational states. And like now I'm kind of at a point where I just, the harder experiences, the ones where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of going through one like kind of right now where I was, in the Cayman Islands for 6 months, and I was detached from my reality. I was like in an environment with people and like, I just felt homesick all of a sudden. And I didn't really, it was like I kept my practice going for like the first 5 months, and then it kind of all just started to fall apart at the end, where I was like, I think it was the overnights on that last movie though too, because it's hard to keep a good consistent schedule going when you're kind of at the mercy of these crazy hours and stuff. So my practice kind of fell apart. I got back home. I still go to the park every morning, but like I'm not sitting there for 45 minutes and like really relishing like just, being alive, like the excitement and exuberance and like the tears that come out when you're in a really strong place. It's kind of like I'm going there because I don't want to as soon as I stop it completely, then, to get back into it is even harder. So you kind of want to just, you want to keep it there. But I go there for 5 minutes and I'm like, okay, cool. This is great. It's not nowhere near what I have experienced, but at least I'm still, doing it, to kind of, I'm owing it to myself to keep it going, and it'll come back around. It's just, you kind of just got to ride with it and allow it to kind of expand and build upon itself, in a way that's like, truthful and genuine to yourself. You don't ever want to force anything. So it's just, I'm at a place where, I'm kind of, I do these, like these group workshops and things like that. Like friends of mine run these programs throughout the year. And one of them, my friend Jesse Stewart, he runs this program called Spiritual Boot Camp. And that's just like, it's like kind of like a book club where we get together. There's like 10 people in the class, and we just go through these like really cool metaphysical books, and we do some of the practices. And if I didn't have that right now, I'd be way more like, I'd feel a little bit more lost, because he's the one that's like, he's showing up, he's holding it down. He's really like, to keeping these connections and this, and I guess they like,
of a community, right?
It's a little community. So, and now I go there every Wednesday. We start off playing music, and then we get into a meditation, and then we start going into some of the concepts of these books and doing all these practices and stuff like that. And to see, it's my 4th year doing it. And it's just really, there's always new faces that come up. There's always new people, like same material a lot of the time. Like the books tend to change a little bit, but it's the new people and the new faces and the new experiences and the dynamics and the unique relationships that are formed with these people.
Well, I guess you're always in a different place slightly as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like, we've all kind of, there's maybe 2 or 3 people that were in the original class 4 years ago, that witnessed like me coming out of like this super intense breakup where I was just like, I was broken. It was really hard for me to even communicate and like, be friendly and accept love from people. It was very closed off. And that program really just helped me kind of break through all that and then find a sense of community and create new bonds and experiences with people. So that's a super important thing, I think, is to just like, for anybody who's kind of not really knowing where to look, it's just meet people, like, make friends, like go out there and like as much as COVID and all these protocols and things like that will allow right now. But it's really about, just meeting people who you kind of aspire to, and just want to learn from. And that's how it all started for me. And for me, it was more, I had all these great tools and pieces of equipment that I just offered up a lot of the times, like for free, just to kind of distract myself and bring myself into these new experiences. And like I met a few friends of mine, Darren Austin Hall, who's like this, he's like a musician.
Is that like the NASA? What is it? NASA? Adventures in Sound recording or something? Maybe never mind.
I'm curious to hear about that. But he's just a musician. He plays the crystal bowls and like creates these epic sound baths.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I feel like I've seen his name in like social media events or something like that related to like a spiritual thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's been a really good friend of mine, and that's kind of what ended up happening was I ventured into these communities and met people and started offering my services to people just to kind of like, especially guided meditation. I found everything I was listening to was just like, it just didn't sound very good. It's just people doing it on their phones and just being it super distracting when you're listening to it. So, I made a great, new group of friends who just like, not only did they, was I cultivating and like redirecting my entire life into like a more joyous kind of state of being, but I was also, like leaving an old life behind, and then just really just seeing what happens. It was just kind of like throwing things out there and then just not really having any expectations, but by doing that, by bringing like the tools and knowledge I had, in the realm of audio, and then just using that as a way to integrate and bring myself into these new experiences. It completely changed my whole life. And I'm super grateful. So.
I think that's really good advice for life in general, honestly, to anyone who wants to get into an industry. And you've mentioned before, a lot of our emerging industries don't have job titles, quotation marks, where the role that you can fill is often very dynamic. And as much as you might be a sound recordist, you might be a bit of a therapist that day too, to get people's attitudes to a certain place where they can communicate, because you're not going to get a good dialogue take if people can't even get in the headspace.
That's right.
But I think, like that has been largely my experience with my meager amount of, success that I've experienced, was just being willing to accept a new experience that I wasn't in control of anymore for a moment. Like, especially, it was very intimidating for Marco to be like, just come out to set. It was just like, what? Like, cause I knew what I was doing in the studio, but that's not the same thing. Like, at all. Because you're no longer the one who is guiding the talent. The talent's guiding you. A lot of the ways. And that's a huge role reversal. And to have the humility to give up that level of control, to know that you're a facilitator, you are not the director in a literal and a metaphorical sense. You're not the one in the controls, but you're there as part of one gear of many that is sort of all trying to spin towards the same thing, but you can't be the one that's stuck because everyone else is relying on you to do that. And I think in much the same way with life, of stand your ground and don't just get walked over for the sake of getting a yes out of someone or to make them like you. But there's a lot of really nice, talented, smart people out there. And if you close yourself off to the idea of learning from other people and from having unique experiences, and just not shutting yourself off to what if of life, because you really can only try new things so many times before you might get too fixed into a rhythm. Like, you have kids, you might feel like you can't. And that's a bit of a fallacy. You can still like live interesting parts of your life despite having commitments. A lot of people say that commitments and being burdened with that is actually the reason you get ahead, is by having responsibility and by feeling like you have to provide for like people or a thing or both, or be responsible to a community that you're a part of and be a fixture of that. Like, being willing to take on that responsibility of someone else depending on you too. But that part doesn't even happen until you are just open. Like, I'm here. I can be available for an experience. This is a little scary. I'm not sure exactly what this is, but I am just going to have the humility to say, you know what? I will not feel like I'm knowing what I'm doing almost the whole time. But by the end of that difficult experience, I will be so much better off. And I will have met so many amazing people. And I hopefully can, through my little sliver of life, maybe enlighten someone else's thing or help them or something like that. So I think that's a really good way to look at it, of just being available for a new experience, because you never know.
And that's exactly, it's a really great way to put it. Like, it was really just, setting yourself up for things that you can't even fathom, could possibly even happen to you, and like just being open to receive and just allowing life to kind of just, offer like the fruits of like what it can actually be, but creating a platform and like a receptacle for that. And like for me, it was actually rebranding my business. In 2013, I rebranded. My recording studio used to be called Erosion Studios. I don't really know where that came from, but I thought it sounded really cool. And getting into binaural beats and like solfeggio frequencies and like all these like really cool meditation tools. Like, there's this one frequency called it's 528, which is it's a vibration, it's a tone. There's a lot of you can read up on it, but there's a lot of theories around like what it means or where it came from. But really, it's known as being a loving vibration. So I named my company that. And that's why it's 528 Recordings, because I work in sound, I work with vibration, and I wanted to create an experience for myself to kind of take me through these joyous experiences and like network and just kind of see where it all went. And it totally worked. It totally brought me from where I was into like these really like high vibing, beautiful states. And it was all because of this, like, creating that platform and like calling it something. And like I'm starting this company for this reason. And I'm going to theme it around love and like intention and connection. And like, and that's kind of what this space is known for. Like my friend Jeremy, like, he comes to record here. Jeremy Legault is a really great...
Shout out, Jeremy.
Yeah, man. Super great musician. And I love it when he refers to the space. He's like, it's not just a recording studio. Like it's a place for people to come and connect and express, and kind of, that's why I started the podcasting arm of it, is so that like we can have conversations like this, and we can capture it really well as well.
Beautiful.
And there's something to be said about setting your mission statement like that.
Yeah.
Where I almost think of calling it 528 is your mission statement, which is to say that above all else, it's going to be a place that you feel welcome and fulfilled, and a place where you're not being looked at in a really judgy way, where you're coming here to be creative and you can be inspired and you don't feel like the pressure's on, you can be here to enjoy yourself and be with people that you really like. And I think that's super important in any studio setting, be it on film or for audio or whatever, to feel like the people that are there with your best intentions in the forefront. That's really hard to find in any professional industries, like people that just genuinely want to look out for your best interests, like a number one priority above all else. Like, you just have to feel fulfilled. And I think that's a really laudable thing to like set yourself towards.
Yeah. And I mean, just by doing that, like I had no idea what was going to happen. It was really just you set that intention, and then you watch how life naturally unravels. And every time something big happens, or like something just you can only explain it as being like just magical, even where like I'm like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that I met that person, or I can't believe that this connection ended up leading to this one and to that one. And then all of a sudden, like, you're just in a completely new place in your life. And you're constantly, like, the thing is, you just don't stop doing it. So you keep moving in that direction, and you keep just, flowing with what feels good. eventually, like, the things that you're trying to let go of, like, well, they'll just kind of fade away, and you'll just be like, life will just kind of be on this, you'll be riding this, this roller coaster, that kind of like you're living your life on the edge. And, there's many ways that people do that. I'm doing it with the recording studio. I'm doing it through my work out in the field, where like every experience I have, every beautiful experience, every negative experience, like is just proving to me that, like, creating that, fostering that idea and creating that intention around wanting to have these experiences, for better or for worse, like it was like one of the most, the best things I could have ever done for myself. And it was really to like get out of these negative experiences that I couldn't seem to really snap out of. And like, it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been like 10 years later. It's not like I completely said goodbye to that entirely, because it's always going to exist.
Right.
There's always going to be those polarities that you're going to have to navigate. And you kind of just embrace both sides of it, and know that it's never going to truly go away. You can just ride with it, and just allowing it to sway back and forth, and like whatever happens, but like existing in the center of it, and just following that same, that intuition, and trying to,
Yeah, I mean, I think you said so many interesting things. I'm really inspired, especially by, I guess, the encouragement to like meet new people in more of the direction that you're hoping to be, in the sense of like, I guess, like positivity and that sort of thing, because I've found that it's been a little bit of a lonely path for me this year, in that I've noticed that in the past, whereas I thought I was so open and friendly and, connecting with a lot of people and giving them a lot of my time, that in the end, and while there's no regrets or anything, in the end, it definitely harmed me in a lot of ways. And I should have been a little bit more focused on myself and what I needed, and being grounded in that way, and having to let go of older friendships, or friendships that I realized were not even based on positive things, but based on, substance abuse or partying, or things that weren't helping either of us. And then thinking that I was doing the right thing by wanting to stick around for that person. But then it turned out that, that's not necessarily the case in it all the time. So for me this year in particular, so I think most of my audience knows at this point, I've been like sober and fully clean since January. And what that's...
Big up to you for doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I think what's that, a lot of the experience up until recently has been me really wanting to lay low, because I was almost afraid of like social interaction, where like I feel more safe and strong like at home. And, it came at a point where I'm like, oh, I think I actually perhaps need to make new friends or meet new people, or yes, I can be super focused and like hardworking and like work on a bunch of things at home and personal development and meditation and working out, but like social interaction and activity is so much part of our lives. And I am missing a little bit of that. And it's at a point where it's like, how do I meet new friends, or like be like embraced into like a new community? So that's really encouraging. I think too, your thoughts around like the momentum of like when you're in your practice, and then if there's a day where something external comes up and you sort of let it go and not do it, and then that turns into a week, and that turns into a couple of weeks. Certainly we talked recently about momentum, and that I find that like I can work both ways. When like if you have really good momentum, it's like you just want to keep it going, which is awesome. But then going the reverse, it's so much harder to get back on track. So for me, a lot of that is around like food and exercise. Like as soon as I let go for like one day, it's so hard to come back the next day. And you wouldn't think, like, that's not even intuitive. I would think like, oh, if I've had a cheat day, then the next day it's like, okay, for sure, like I'm good. But no, in fact, it's like the mind is like, well, that was like a really nice day, so you should just like stick to that. So the momentum with the practice is interesting because so meditation specifically is something that I was very focused on maybe like 10 years ago when I first sort of discovered it. And a lot of it, the time it was coupled with substance abuse. And then
just kind of counter, right? It's like the whole thing,
let it go for many, many years, and only in the last couple of years started to try to get back into it, but had a hard time kind of making it a regular habit. So it was at a point where it was like, maybe I'll meditate once every like few weeks or so. This time around, it's been with guided meditations through like an app. So it's like nicely recorded and it's nice, and they have different themes that I can pick. And I found that that's been helpful. Whereas in the past, I'd only ever done silent stuff, never done breathing practices too, cool. Which I was really interested to hear, because I'd certainly be curious to check that out further. But yeah, with the meditation practices, I've only, at this point in time, I'm at a point where I've, for the first time ever, like meditated like every single day for just about 2 months for the first time ever. And I definitely feel like, because it's becoming a little bit more of like a daily habit, on the days where I haven't meditated yet, or it's like later in the day, I do start to feel kind of, if you've been around me or for this like too, I've start to feel like I feel kind of weird. Like I feel like I just need to do it. And that's a good place to be, because I know that it's helping. And here's where I'm also challenged too, of like, I'd like to be able to express how it's helping. Because in my mom's words, like, you know, you're kind of forgetting about your problems and you're not being responsible because you're just, you know, I guess shutting off for a second. Whereas I find that it helps me be able to tackle problems better, because I'm clear, I'm more grounded, I feel stronger, I do feel more calm. So it's not even almost like, I guess, yes, like in some cases, like meditation is for relaxation, but for me, I just feel like it is very grounding. Yes, you'll still have like thoughts going, but slowly I'm able to I'll have moments of like, oh, I just realized I was thinking. And like, that's part of the whole crux of the thing, where like, it's not like you're never going to have thoughts, but it does help you identify when you're kind of like spiraling. And I find that nowadays, more often, just during my waking life, where I'm like, you know, for example, walking outside, I'll start to catch myself spiraling into like something critical that somebody said to me, and I'm suddenly spiraling about it. But then I'll have the other voice come in and say, okay, thank you. Like, you're thinking, and then it like seems to cut off the spiraling earlier. So just like things like that.
And I find that, you know, the more frequent that you meditate, and the more it's really consistency, I find. And like, the more you do it on a daily or weekly basis, you can kind of, you know, your meditations start to string together, and then you can kind of, you can witness the evolution of like what it is that you're working through start to diminish over time and transform into something different. And you can do that, like if I were to just, you know, take 5 minutes and go meditate and calm my mind like I did before starting this. It's different compared to like actively working, utilizing it to like work through something. And I find that, you know, doing meditation consistently is just really revealing to you what it is, like what your cycles and what your mental patterns are, and how preoccupied we are with things that have happened in the past or things that are coming in the future. And really, if you can create a space for yourself to just exist and it's not about, I mean, at least for me, it's not about trying to detach or anything like that. It's just truly giving yourself a moment to just be, like to just like actually like witness yourself in this body, like realizing you're not your mind, you're not your body, you're not who you are. Like we're just pure, you know, cosmic consciousness. We're just like beings that have, we're really trying our best to like navigate these trials and tribulations and all these things that life throws at us. But But if you can create that space to just exist as just pure awareness, whatever that means, there's so many different ways you can look at it. And like what it means for me would mean something completely different from someone else. And like my experiences would be different than someone else's experiences. But, I mean, if people are having a hard time trying to find out what that is for them, it's if people haven't looked into pranayama, which is like what I've been using as a series of breathing practices to just get me set up for meditation. Like I'll do pranayama for like 30 minutes every morning, and then once I've done my set, then I will attempt meditation. It's like meditation comes after you've really calmed your body and primed it for to just being in a space where you can just be, and like I said, thoughts and things like that are always going to be there, but the deeper you get into your practice, the more rewarding it is, like anything else. But there's like an extra for anybody who hasn't tried it yet or hasn't really done it for months on end, or don't really know what it is that can, what people are talking about, like when they say that you can have these out of body experiences or you can have these really beautiful blissful states. I think a lot of people may be discouraged when they attempt to do it, and then after like a week are like, oh, that didn't really work for me.
Right.
I'm going to stop here. But it's really like just continuously breaking through that, and like just there, I promise there's something beautiful waiting for people on the other end of things if they just continued with it. And I'm at, like, again, I've been doing it for years. I'm at a place right now where I'm like, why am I even doing this again? Like I'm a little bit discouraged because I've like slowed down to a point where it feels like I'm starting at ground zero again. And it's like, it's really, a lot of it comes down to how you treat your body. And like, if you don't exercise, if you don't stretch, if you're like constantly drinking coffee and eating sugars and, eat foods that aren't really good for you, all of that starts to build up and contribute to you feeling like you're kind of in these places where you're like mentally or physically fatigued and kind of like drained, or just like your mind is a little bit mucky and you're not really feeling connected. As soon as you start to like, it all kind of goes tenfold, where it's like, it's what you eat. It's how you breathe. It's like how you interact with people. It's like every little thing starts to add up, and that will influence like how like what your practice is and what your experience is. And it's all kind of like has to be all like finely tuned, and eventually, if you keep dialing it in and you kind of keep dealing with all these things separately, it's all you're gonna witness it click at some point, and you're like, oh right, this is exactly what I've been working towards and what I've been waiting for. And it might not happen for years for some people.
Right.
Might not have that breakthrough. And like I've had maybe 2 or 3 in my life. Like the first one was like in 2014, where I didn't really know what meditation was. I didn't know what spirituality was. I didn't know any of it. I was just kind of throwing myself in there and trying to have these experiences I kept reading about. And then sure enough, it was like one summer, I don't know, just something happened. Something like started to arise from within me, and it started to just change how I talked to people, how I interacted. Like everything about me started to change. And like that was great for a little while. And then sure enough, I started to get stuck in these old patterns again. And then I met a partner at the time in 2014. And she was quite like, compared to me at the time, she was way more advanced, so to speak. Like she had already spent months living in ashrams and like really like honing in and harnessing like her diet. And like she was, man, like just looking back on it now, like that relationship just was such a 180 in my life, and like what that provided for me at the time, like exactly what I was seeking. Like I got it all in such a short period of time, and it was like super intense. It was so intense to the point that I was pushing it away because I'm like, this is way too much for me to have to grow into in such a short period of time. And when that relationship ended, I had a second experience for an entire summer that like had me, I was like looking back on the one that happened 4 years prior. I'm like, this can't ever happen like this again. Like that was such an intense, blissful awakening. That's the only way I can, the only way I can really call it. And it happened again. And it was like an even more powerful, explosive, ecstatic kind of like, just, you know, beautiful state of being that I realized what you're truly capable of experiencing if you just let go of what your expectations are and just like put your heart first and just see where it takes you. And then again, you know, it starts to tame itself down a little bit. And now I'm like, when's the next one going to come? But if you get stuck in that, if you get stuck in, trying to chase these spiritual highs, or, you know, a lot of people they treat breathing practices as that. They get addicted to these like sober spiritual like sensations where they're like, you know, I've had like experiences while meditating that, you know, are similar to microdosing on LSD or mushrooms. Like it's just, you're kind of in these states and you're just, your body is buzzing. You're like seeing colors. You're going into all these really cool spaces where, you know, visions start to come and like, you know, all of like this really like this Hearts Gone Beyond. Actually, this logo is a not-for-profit that I'm planning to start soon. And that came to me in a meditation, you know, it's just like it's just truly, it's like the lens that you can utilize to kind of look into your future and see what needs to be done in your life to make it better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also noticed that sometimes in being able to clear my mind a little bit is when I'll have sort of thoughts and ideas come for like next podcast guest or like do this video idea or something. And then I'll have the experience of like, okay, but I'm still meditating. So just like try to remember that for later or like whatever. But it's really interesting to hear your experiences because for me, it's been like a very much smaller version of that in that, you know, I'll have meditations that are only 10 minutes, 15 minutes. In the last few weeks, those have increased to 20, and that's already like, whoa, I'm meditating for 20 minutes. Like it's pretty huge. So I do want to be, I guess, encouraging for folks of all capabilities where it's, you know, you can really just start from 5 minutes and already that can have an impact. And as you said, like it'll string together. And for me as well, like not really doing specific breathing practices, but just the whole, because I too, I had this misconception, I guess, of meditation of that maybe you need to breathe in a certain way and then only then you'll get like a certain expected result. And after doing some of the guided meditations and kind of it showing you that it's not always the breathing itself, but rather because the breath is one of the only constants in life, that by focusing on the breath or by following the breath or just try to think about nothing else other than the breath, or for me sometimes even just like counting the breaths has helped, that itself gives my mind something to focus on such that I'm not getting like lost in thoughts. And when I am, inevitably within 20 or 30 seconds, remembering like, okay, yeah, focus on the breath. And then you start again and you start again. And even just that alone has been really life-changing. And so I'll continue to sort of, you know, be dedicated to that practice as well as expressing it, because I do want to share more of that with the world. I like that meditation practices are becoming, from what I can tell, a little bit more common in culture, but just, breaking through to people like my mom where, super high power driven person, but I really feel like meditation can benefit them, and hoping that just sprinkling these seedlings of within humanity of like, there's a reason that this kind of thing has also been a practice for thousands of years that has helped people. So,
and like speaking from experience, I've spent a very long time also trying to like inspire people in my family to want to get into meditation. And this was like when I was first starting out, right? So I remember, my sibling and my mom would get annoyed with me after a while, because they're like, you're telling us to try all these things, but really like you're not really doing it yourself. Or like it took me a long time to realize that, if I want to inspire the people around me to want to get into doing this, and questioning like why I'm trying to tell them to do it in the first place is because I'm like maybe annoyed by how they're reacting to things, and like you need to meditate kind of thing, right? Like if I truly want them to like take on these experiences, and to just, even when I tell people about meditation and some of the experiences that I've had, I'm only sharing it because of like what it's truly done for me, and like what I know it can do for others if they were open to it, not because they're doing something in their life that's like wrong or what have you.
Right. If you're not inviting them to join your cult or your religion. Like
exactly.
You're just kind of asking people to be like mindful. Yeah. And like take a moment or moments to reground yourself and like put yourself back into like a more available state to like then be better for the people in your life and be better to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's been cool to see other like people's like transformations in my life. As soon as I like stop trying to, push meditation onto other people and just kind of be like, wait, why am I even like, let's focus on myself here.
Right.
Let's take everything I've just learned, everything I'm preaching even, and just like apply it to my own life before I'm trying to tell other people to do it. As soon as I did that, it had this ripple effect where like people around me just started to ask me more questions about it because they saw me embodying it as opposed to just talking about it all the time. And like that, like changed not only my life, but my entire family. Like it had this ripple effect, and it keeps doing that. Like no matter, even people I work with, like I'm not, when I'm on set, I'm just being me. I'm just doing my thing, but it's still has a natural effect to like ripple outwards and influence how people behave and like how people, like how they act around you. That's just like my favorite part about it too, to see how you being the person that you are, just being naturally yourself, not pretending to be anything you're not, but like being genuine and authentic and taking what you've learned through these meditative experiences and then applying it every single day for days on end, years on end, where that can lead you and like where that leads everybody else. It's just beautiful to witness and experience.
Like beacon of grounding for other people. Because I think, and this has always been true ever since I met you. You've always been, I think, the kind of calm voice in the room of like not letting other people think that the pressure's getting to you, where you can just be, calm, focused, you're on point, and like everything's cool. Even when it's not, everything's cool, because we're all here doing something, we're achieving something really great and something cool. And isn't it how amazing is it that we're all here, like focusing on this thing? And that's something that I think also drew me to realize that you were someone I really wanted to have around in my life, of like someone that didn't just go around for the recognition of stuff, or like didn't want to just tell all these fantastical stories. Oh, I work with this, work with that. It's just like, someone can ask if they're interested, but like, I think, it speaks a lot of good about you that you can be so emotionally available for the people that you work with, as well as people you live with and know, where rather than telling them how they should live in the words, it's your actions will reflect, why it is A, that they want to hang around you, and B, maybe would at some point, months or years down the line, maybe prompt them to ask. Because it's like, so what are you doing differently than me? That you never seem to be in this all frazzled thing. And it's not that don't get frazzled, but the thing is that you're trying to always reflect on that and figure out, it's just like, okay, well, why am I getting frazzled? Like, well, what's the deal here? And sometimes it takes months to figure yourself out. Like, I don't know why. I'm getting all worked up about stuff. I mean, in cases where you're broken up, I mean, it's pretty clear why. But other times it's like not even understandable, where you ask yourself, why am I frustrated or why am I anxious right now? Because like you look at all the stuff in your life and everything's so great and yada yada, but yet still, where am I at? You know, and I think it's great to lead by example. Let the curious ask.
Right.
But for anyone else, it's just like be that beacon of positive, good, welcoming energy. And then I think the rest will kind of follow suit. Right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's just kind of cool to see how, like what people's responses actually are. 'Cause some people like don't notice. I'm just an average person. Like there's nothing that special about me at all. But then for some people who are struggling in their life, like I'll stand out because I'm very, like I'll just be, like you said, like just calm in most situations that, you know, someone else might be. And like my anxiety, like I've actually had to work through a lot of anxiety. I still have it now. So like all of that, if I'm not careful, the things that I'm either like, if, you know, meditation helps me work through things, but I got to be careful not to kind of like suppress or to be passive aggressive, because then it builds up in a completely different area of my life, and it comes out in ways where like, I might not like act out in certain situations. Like I might not lash out if somebody says something or does something that like bothers me, but like in a tense situation, it'll come out in a completely different way that's still, like it impacts me in a way that like I'm still trying to navigate and avoid. And that's kind of, it's still cool to see how that, you know, like you refining yourself as a person, how that can impact people just by them, you know, like having gone and worked for 6 months down in the Cayman Islands. Like some people are like, cool, nice to meet you, man. And then a couple other people are like, so what is it that you like do? Cause you're like, you're just, your sense of being and just the way that you approach people and how you talk to people and like, you know, your overall sense of joy, really. I think that's what stands out for people who meditate and people who seek meditation or seek to be more mindful in their life, is like people who do practice meditation. It's not that they're positive or anything like that. It's that they're like truly exuberant. They're like living in states of like genuine, authentic joy, you know, like, and you can't fake that. That's something that, that comes from the heart, and like you'll notice it when you see it in someone, and those people are, you know, they have a lot of potential to impact others. So,
yeah. And then like and that's just it. Like the people you respect and the people that you like commiserate with have really the most amount of influence in your life. And I think it's so powerful to surround yourself with other people, as you say, that have the character traits that you wish you emulated better. Of like, I wished I worked this hard. I wish that I could have the discipline for this. I wish I could show this amount of like good, positive like feedback, or that I could be so like available like this person is. And I think that's it. And that's advice I think I hear a lot across many different genres of advice, is like just primarily, number one, be around the people that you feel like are doing something really, really exceptional. And at that point, you'll feel infinitesimally more like inspired to want to change yourself to get into that state of mind. And you can mutually lift each other up, because it's not that's like, right. You know, hanging around high achieving people means that you're like sapping their energy down or whatever. Right. Because if you're coming from a genuine place, like you'll be helpful to them too in so many ways. And it's really about lifting each other up in any healthy relationship, of like, you're not specifically coming to it saying, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? That type of thing. You're not writing it down. But I think in any situation where you have a mutual respect for each other, like really genuinely, as you say, like you're not just putting it on to like get something, but really it's like, yes, I respect you, Marco, or it's something like that. It's at that point where you have unprompted back and forth, where you feel like I don't even have to be asked the question of I want to do this, or I want to help here, or be available for this. You will just do that. Because your respect and your almost, I guess, like that love for that person you would have is your primary focus. And you just realize in that moment of like, I need to be available for this or do this thing to help this person, because they're now almost like an extension of me in some way of, because I'm impacting their life. Like, how would I treat myself in that moment? And what I would want to do is do the right thing for anyone in my life, right?
I will also say, just for, because in my experience of like, yes, I want to be around more positive people, or, have better role models in my life. And, how do you meet people? How do you make friends? And then especially in times of COVID, like that type of thing, I think one thing that's really helped me, short of actually like meeting new, like physical humans, has been just starting to listen to more positive stuff, I guess, through people online. So like the David Goggins, the Eckhart Tolle, like they're people that I'm never probably gonna like meet or befriend, but by having more of them like in my ear, whether it's like listening to an interview or something they said on a podcast or one of their videos, I'm finding that that's providing a lot of this like a similar, I guess, benefit of like, I just need to hear more of this, because otherwise I find that if I'm not actively seeking that out, you'll probably more find that what you are coming across is, just like stuff that maybe it's more negative, or news, or even like feelings of jealousy of like, if you're looking on your social feed and like everybody's highlights and all the good stuff, and like that's not necessarily providing like positive benefit per se either. So yeah, short of actually like, I guess, meeting people as best you can, at least making sure that you're kind of consuming that kind of content until you do meet another great friend like Marco.
Exactly. And you should watch more lovely shows like yours.
Well, I mean, thank you.
Thank you for bringing me on your show.
Thank you so much for having us here. That does feel like a nice, maybe little point to wrap it up. This has been so, so lovely. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, me too, man. I really appreciate you like being willing to do this. It's like, it's a big step.
It was a huge step.
Yeah.
Huge step for me, for this space. If you don't mind, if anybody wants to follow my space, it's 528 Recordings on Instagram. They can also follow me, Marco Furgiuele, on Instagram. That's my location sound page. So it's MARCO_FURGIUELE. And then if you want to follow my nonprofit, which I'm just still getting off the ground, it's still about a year or so away before I even launch it, but it's called Hearts Gone Beyond. And I have a couple stickers for you guys.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, here you go.
We got to stick them in conspicuous places.
Awesome.
There you go. So if you don't mind, you basically stick these up anywhere you go. If it's like another city or just in Toronto, and then just tag Hearts Gone Beyond on Instagram. And
thank you so much. We'll definitely put all of your social links and links to everything in the description. So we'll definitely have that there.
And can people order these?
Yes. So if you send me a message on my Hearts Gone Beyond Instagram, I'll send you a sticker for free. Yeah.
There you go. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just spreading love.
Yes.
That's the intention behind it.
That's awesome, man. But thanks again for having on, or rather for coming on the show. You've been an amazing guest, an amazing friend, great human being. So I'm just really glad that like all three of us could like share really good, like positive energy with each other.
Yeah.
We did this. This was like a long time coming.
Many reschedules.
We've captured it, even if just for us for like 50 years from now. Like,
I know.
A treasure.
Oh man.
I'm so glad.
Good.
thank you for having us in this space to be able to have this kind of conversation. I know the first time we met, we had a really great long conversation as well. But now it's filmed.
I know. We've captured it. We can refer to this conversation, you know?
Yeah. What a way to have a 10th episode of the podcast.
Big time.
Man.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll do it again, I think, at some point,
There'll be a follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a great chemistry here.
Well, now I feel like, I gotta do like every podcast episode.
I mean, you know, what happens?
It's here.
Man.
Let's see, because this is an amazing space.
It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I do want to, next time, perhaps we have an episode with you, I'd love to get more into the Hearts Gone Beyond stuff.
Yes. That'll be, you know, let's do that next time for sure.
Yeah.
I'll have more organized and ready to show for it at that point.
Amazing.
It's still coming together, but
I really look forward to that.
Amazing. Cool. Well, sending love to all of you listening and watching. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Tyr and Marco, for being here with me. Sending love. Hearts Gone Beyond. Marco.
See you guys.
Bye, everybody.